So while James is getting set up, I'll just do a little introduction. So James Tagg is the founder and CTO of Truphone. Now, Truphone are really rewriting the rules of what it means to be a telco, not only in delivering customer-centric services at a fair price, and for anybody that roams or has to do international calls, you know what I mean, but also they're leading in their understanding and support for telecom application developers. They are the only telco sponsor of TADHack. So just to highlight that, we have many of the key technology platforms. We've just heard from Mark, but they are the only telco. They get it in terms of their future survival depends on telecom application developers. So, what I'd like to do now is, okay, we'll just, so are you good, James?
1 second.
No problem. And again, they'll have a session this afternoon. So Ubuntu Canonical have a session this afternoon. I can see it up there, nearly. And also Truphone will have a session this afternoon as well, where they'll go into more detail around their vision and how they want to, and how they plan to work with developers in the future on their network. Do you want the, are you going to run it from the podium, or do you want to?
I'll take this, the microphone. So while we're getting our technology to work, I thought I'd talk about some stuff that's not bits and bytes and stacks and so on, because almost every presentation today will be about bits and bytes and stacks. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about what we're trying to do when we make a communications product, and really sort of the way that humans communicate with each other. And so that's, and so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about body language, bandwidth, and banter, okay, the 3 Bs of communication. So the first thing, let me just tell you a little bit about Truphone, the mobile operator. So this is obviously a marketing slide, we're redefining mobile. But if you think about it, if you started building a mobile operator today for the world, a worldwide mobile operator, you do it the way that someone like Facebook or Google or Amazon does it, which is to have a single logical stack with, as we heard earlier, lots and lots of machines, and you'd rack it up in a sort of, in that way, and then you distribute those things that you need to distribute. You would not build 220 completely independent stacks for each country with different billing systems and the whole works. You just wouldn't do it. So that is what we've built. Sorry about the eye chart slide. So we've built a single operator. Let me give you a slide. This is a marketing slide, so you can actually see what's going on. So what we've done is built a global mobile operator where we've put 2 data centers, one in Amsterdam, one in London, and then we've distributed all our GGSNs and our audio switching around the world, so we've got one in each region. So we keep data and audio close. We move SMS as it happens all the way back to Amsterdam, London, and we can therefore serve the whole world with a non-roaming solution to mobile. i.e. not roaming, I mean we're keeping your data local. If you're roaming with an operator today and you go to America with a UK operator, all your data will go back to Amsterdam and then it will go to London via the GRX system, and then it'll go back out to America. So you've got this massive distance that gets inserted into the thing. Why do people buy what we have? Well, if you've globalized and you've got, say, a factory in Texas and your design studio is in Germany, fairly typical, or the other way around, whatever, then you really want to be able to be in either country as if you're at home. So what we offer is a mobile phone service that's home in both America and Germany. And in fact, it's home in 8 countries. And last week, we increased our footprint to 66 countries. So you're now in bundle wherever you travel in 66 countries. That's the whole of North America, the whole of Europe, right? Every European country, not just the ones that got together in the sort of EEC or anything like that, which obviously includes Russia. Then the whole of China and Hong Kong, Australia, a bit of South America. We haven't done all of South America yet. And we haven't really got into Africa, but we would love to do so. So that's what we have. It's quite cool. It's all IP under the hood. We've got a complete VoIP SIP system, as well as all of the standard GSM kit that you'd want. So it's quite a big toy box, which we might be able to open up to a few of you if we can work out a way to do it, which is obviously James's discussion and talk this afternoon, so opening up Truphone. Right, so if we look at sort of communication, to some extent communication, I brought my little book. Right? This was the sum total of communication knowledge when Claude Shannon published his book sort of 50 years ago. And he basically sort of looked at the thing and said, if you're trying to put symbols down a channel, it looks a bit like entropy in physics, and he worked out Shannon's law, and we've got Nyquist theorems and so on. I thought, shall I talk about those things to this audience? I thought, no, because our industry didn't start with Shannon. It started with the Sumerians, when they basically first encoded the thoughts that are in our head into symbols. And those symbols, that's cuneiform, and they basically stamped those into clay, and that with a stick, which is why the symbols aren't very beautiful. And then over the last 5,000 years, we've built up a whole bunch of symbolic representations of knowledge, and those split approximately evenly into people who use pictographic representations, China, and Japan, actually, who share the same pictographic representation, but not the same spoken language, and the rest of us sort of phonetic boys. So let's see if you're paying attention. So hieroglyphics, is it phonetic language or a pictographic language? Hands up who thinks it's a pictographic language. Pictures show the meaning, right? Phonetic language? Don't know? Lots of people. Okay, so everyone thought it was a pictographic language. It's a phonetic language. You can tell because the I is, so that says Hello Reader. That's out of Google Translate. Thank you very much, Google. So that's Hello Reader, and they haven't got hieroglyphics in Google Translate. I had to do that. The I is Ra, the sun god, and so that's Ra, Reader. So it's a phonetic language. The problem is that we've only been able to communicate using symbols for about 5,000 years, and so we've had to co-opt bits of our brain to do it. So we weren't originally built to do symbolic communication. Obviously, we've evolved for a long, long time to speak to each other and hit each other with clubs and all those sorts of things. But what basically happens is that each language group that we pick as our, well, we don't pick, we're born into it, aren't we, generally, uses different bits of the brain. So French and Spanish people here, you have a nice, standard, regular phonetic language, and you use your auditory cortex to do most of your language processing and work out symbols and spell and all these things. Poor people like me who are English, we have an irregular language. So we have words like sugar and Leicester and things like that, which drive me personally mad. I'm fairly profoundly dyslexic. Although, in the modern world, you can ignore it largely because computers deal with it. And then Chinese and Japanese children, they learn their language by drawing the symbols over and over and again in clay tablets or whatever. And so they use their motor cortex for a large part of their processing. And a lady called Marianne Wolf at MIT has done a lot of research on dyslexic people and has actually found that some people can be dyslexic in one language, but if you move them to a different language, they're not dyslexic in that language because they've got a problem linking their motor cortex to their speech or auditory cortex to process language. But if you give them Spanish, for example, they might be fine, right? So maybe I'll move over to Spanish and French from English since it drives me nuts. I'm really talking here about humans communicating. I mean, machines don't really communicate at the moment. You have these sort of phrases in the language like, that song really spoke to me. But inanimate objects really don't yet communicate. And obviously this is a good debating topic later. There's clearly some inanimate objects like lighthouses and things that do tell us something. They tell us not to crash into a rock. So let's look a little bit about what humans are good and bad at. So we can recall 1,000 faces. Super recognizers, which they've now discovered, remember every face they've ever seen, right? And can recall, all faces and can just glance at a face and then recognize it forever. We're very, very poor with symbolic memory, right? We are dreadful at names, remembering things. I've got to remember 1 minute 55 in a moment, which I've managed to do from there to here. But that was a major effort to actually remember those symbols. We're very good at hierarchy, right? We are hierarchical animals, and we know who reports to who and so on. Org charts, obviously, anyone who's at TADHack is basically someone who hates the concept of org charts, but we are programmed to do well with them. We get terribly embarrassed. So imagine, it'll have happened to you sometime in your life, but very, very rarely. You phone someone up, and you talk to them for a period of time, and they're the wrong person, right? You'll remember it. You're all right. You laugh. You'll all remember it. It was one of the most embarrassing things you ever did in your life, and that's partly because it's a social faux pas, but also we're also programmed to know friend from foe. So you just spoke to someone who you thought you knew and was a friend, and in fact they were a different person, and you'd have said different things to them. So it's very important that we know who we're doing. We're not very precise at communicating. Here's me being exemplary of that. We're very good visually, but yet we're very bad at making visual things. I was going to make you all draw a little map or try and show each other how to get to your office or your home. We might do that for fun at lunchtime or something with a few people. But we're just very bad at that sort of thing. We're also very poor at paying attention. And it's very nice that we've had the Wi-Fi turned off and everyone's really paying attention here. But that attention deficit is a problem. Let me show you now a little bit of these sort of things that I just listed. Lists are boring, a terrible way to present. And let's just have a look at a very famous example. And of course, I'm now going to break all of the AV. I'm terribly sorry. That's going to work. That's good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Throw in the fear and tension present in most Middle East negotiations, and suddenly the desire of both Arafat and Barak not to go through that door before the other starts to make sense. As a sign that Arafat and Barak were getting on well. Think again.
There is a great meaning behind who goes through the door first. Now, of course, here in the...
So Barak reaches for Yasser Arafat. Arafat literally grabs his arm, moves around, and starts waggling his finger at Barak, Barak then uses it as an opportunity, like a wrestling match, to move around to actually be behind Arafat, and then literally grabs Arafat, who holds him by the arm, and...
Yeah, so you get it, right? So the interesting thing there is, I mean, these are world leaders, and they understand hierarchy and power more than any of us, right? So if I take you up to the door and say, come into my house, it's my house, right? So each of them wanted to say, come into my house, because it's my house with Bill Clinton, we're buddies, and you're the outsider. And they basically spent 30 seconds outside the door, sort of, no, you're not having that one on me. And eventually they kind of both looked at each other and said, okay, we both understand the situation, let's go. So another one, so this is Gorbachev and Reagan when they're just about to, well, actually they never signed anything because basically their minders stopped them, because Reagan had just offered to abolish all nuclear weapons, right? And all of his negotiators going, oh my God, right? But you can see they're getting on really well. Oh, and I did have Putin and Obama as well somewhere in the stack, who, if you've seen that picture, are like going and facing the opposite way. So we really have this sort of body language. And it's something that computers don't do, but we do a lot. So we really care about these sort of social things. We need to establish trust with people that we know, and in order to, and there's this Morabian law, which is usually misquoted. So the misquote is that the content of information is 7% words, 38% tone of voice, and 55% body language. So that's not what he said. What he said was that the emotional content of communication is, right? So, which I think probably makes sense. So if you're trying to get over some piece of communication where trust is important, you should bear in mind that in the regular world, when we meet face-to-face like this, we establish trust with each other and all the emotional content with tone of voice and body language, not with the symbolic words or the grammar that we put out. That means bandwidth is pretty important to you for the audio quality, and video is pretty important if you want to get that sort of effect. So, bandwidth. We all talk about bandwidth. I mean, has anyone any idea what the bandwidth of reality is? So we have human beings talking across the world through some channel. We're here now, we're in person, so we're proper real conversation. So if you look at it, there's a huge debate on this topic, somewhat kicked off by me. So one argument is that all you need is sufficient digits to digitize things, well enough. So IMAX level theatre experience should basically give it. So if I give a lecture over IMAX, you should get the same out of it than me. The problem is the bandwidth of reality is extraordinarily high. So when I focus on one of you, put my entire favor in your direction, and I concentrate half of my cones, on just a 2-degree arc. So if you wanted to make a display that could mimic reality for me, you'd need to be 10,000 times more resolution than even IMAX, which is already 10,000 by 10,000 pixels. And of course, it's not stereo. It's not 3D. So actually, to get a proper view of reality, the MIT guys worked out that it's about 100 trillion samples per inch if you really want to digitize reality, completely. And they were assuming that they were quantizing it. So there's obviously a discussion as to whether reality is quantized or not, which I don't have enough time to go into here. But it may be that this is a different experience than the experience we have when we're remote from each other and we digitize and compress and so on. So the other thing about communication is background context. We say very few words, and yet we communicate a huge amount of skill, experience, knowledge, and so on from each other. And I think that the best little kind of sketch that explains background context is this Two Ronnies sketch. For the English people, right, in the audience, you can look away now, and I'll just tell the non-English people that the sketch relies on a phonetic trick that X sounds like eggs. Okay? Just so that you're not... And also we'll cue it up because it being an old sketch.
L-O. L-O. R-U-B-C. Yes, we are BC.
L-O.
L-O. L-O.
L-O.
F-U-N-E-X. S, V-F-X. F-U-N-E-M. 9.
So you can see, so if, for example, someone in my family says, "What do you want for breakfast?" and I text back X, that is an in-joke in the family, right? It has background context of that sketch. They've all watched that sketch about 1 billion times because I've been writing a book, and that sketch is embedded in an iBook author book, and I've had to debug it all and so on, so they're kind of driven nuts. But then, so there's this background context, and this sort of humor that's established. And we have to kind of wonder why, the third B of body language, bandwidth, and banter is banter, and that's the sort of humor that we use. Now, computers don't really use humor, but we use humor a lot. Part of the reason I think we use humor is to get people to pay attention, right? Attention is a real problem for human beings. We just generally don't pay attention to things, and when we don't pay attention to things, some of the structures within our brain, so there's a chemical that's secreted when we pay attention to something, and it turns our neurons plastic, and our neurons then will remember things. And if we don't pay attention, then those neurons don't get plasticized, and we therefore don't remember things, we don't acknowledge things. We're a massive filter. So that sort of attention is very important to learning, memory, and comprehension. So it's very, very important that we get attention from people. There's some attempts by computers to tell jokes. There's a machine called Jape, which creates jokes. So what's the difference between leaves and a car? One you bake and brush and rake, the other you rush, break, and bake. So they can do it, but they're very formulaic. So if you're designing a new product, you need to think about this fact that humans work in a very different way to machines, and think about the sort of the human interaction and the fact that you've got a human brain with all of its frailty and you know, sort of difficulties at one end of the communication and very often at the other. So we have to do things like discovery, right? It is very embarrassing for me to speak to the wrong person. It's quite hard for me to remember a person who I have met at this meeting. So I will go back and I will use a variety of tools like Facebook and LinkedIn to go, I can remember the company you worked for, I can't remember his name. Remember companies, hierarchy, social graphs were quite good at that stuff, names were very bad at. I could probably remember his face, so if I can get to something like Facebook or LinkedIn that has faces and go, I know he works for Oracle, in fact, I know lots of information about him, you know who you are, but I can't remember his name right now. I can use all those tricks in my brain to get there. So you need to be aware that humans use a variety of tricks to do things that, you know, they're not very good at. So if you're sitting there writing a piece of code that says, right, when name equals blah, 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 then communicate A to B, which is the sort of code that we write, remember that most humans will not remember the name. They will not come to your software with the name or the IP address or the destination. They will not do it. There's a whole piece ahead of it, right, which is this discovery, remembering, narrowing down to the right person, establishing the hierarchy. Have I got a right to speak to this person? Getting through whatever permission engine that they've got, whether I mean, there's lots of people on Facebook that you can't befriend anymore because they had too many friends, so you can only follow them, so you've got all that sort of stuff. So, and then, you know, you've got to think about humor and games. I mean, humans play games and enjoy games. We love doing that sort of stuff. We're quite humorous. You go to Facebook, vast majority of the posts in Facebook are all little jokes, videos of chipmunks doing stupid stuff and so on, right? It's all humor and sort of this banter. And we get very obsessed with being very precise about our communications with symbols, and we forget humans just aren't. And you can go through Facebook, having had this sort of little talk to me, from me, and go through all the things they do to cope with these various facets of the human mind in terms of hierarchy, humor, social graph, faces, obviously, which is where it really started because of that insight that faces were so important. So what we're doing, and we might show you a little bit of this afternoon, is we're doing a WebRTC product that uses all of those concepts of social graph and hierarchy and knowledge of people to make a sort of a new type of communication product. And hopefully, or we may be able to work out with a few of you how we open that up and federate and do some interesting things to build the social graph. So that's me. And I'll just leave you with one question to ponder. So what's inside our brains, right? We communicate information that's inside my brain to your brain, right? What's in that brain? Easy to computer. Thank you.
James, I'm just going to grab the mic here.
Oh, okay, right.
So do we have any questions from the Madrid audience? I'll just open up. We have one from Pune in India. Well, this is a global event.
It's fantastic.
So they asked, given your global coverage, they're interested in, are you looking to expose APIs from Truphone's network?
Yes, so we do have an API there which we use internally, so all of the systems communicate over a fairly standard enterprise bus. and then give out an API, either REST or SOAP. And we are in the process of trying to turn that into something that third parties could get access to. Obviously, the most simple and prosaic thing is so that a channel who wanted to sell our product can just dip into the interface and get the CDRs, or take one of their customers and upgrade or downgrade their packages and all those sorts of things. But I think we heard on the earlier talk that once you sort of richly open up your signaling system, then you could do some very fun things in terms of mashing things up. So I get to mash things up today because I'm inside my network, and the question is, how do I open it to you so that you can do the same thing?
No, very good point. Any questions from the Madrid audience? Okay, I'll just pop down there to Andre.
So communication symbols like hieroglyphs and letters and so on, they were created to make communication easier because you couldn't be present there. But they also allow you to pass information through time because you can record something and play it back. So do you see any, I mean, here we are more concerned about real time, but do you see anything that we could also use with the technologies that we're developing to make these through-time communication more effective?
Oh, well, short or long time. So we're all talking about real-time communication, and yet most of us don't do it anymore, right? The number of times I actually pick up the phone and use voice to speak to someone in real time is very rare. I mean, basically, I'll do asynchronous type communication where I'll ask a question, get an answer, so maybe an hour later, and a lot of that will be solving basic problems and then arranging to meet. So the kind of the phone call is to some extent being squeezed out, and I think it's to some extent being squeezed out because sometimes it's just not high enough bandwidth. I don't think you'd squeeze it out if you had a super high bandwidth with video and so on, because then you get the level of interaction you have. In terms of a long time scale, it's a worry as to whether our data is going to be preserved over a long time scale.
What about, I know still shorter time, but just between Europe and the US? Like staying awake for a meeting is not the easiest thing to do sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been playing with some stuff because we give numbers out to people in the US and the UK, and you have 2 numbers. The biggest request is do not disturb when I'm asleep. So you have to sort of time shift, because you've got a natural time shift. You have to try and time shift the permission window when you can phone someone, because you don't know when you're phoning my US number that actually I'm in England and it's the middle of the night. You wouldn't phone me otherwise. You'd be polite and not phone me. So we're having to create some tools as you globalize and you give people identities around the world that let people keep the etiquette right.
Yeah, thank you.
Did you read Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson?
I have not read that book, I'm sorry.
Really? I mean, just like your presentation at the beginning, all about the Sumerian language, it's based on that. So
I have read a lot of material in the area, but I haven't read that particular
It's a great book. Recommend it.
Yeah, okay, brilliant.
Well done.
Yes.
So any other questions before we wrap up on James's keynote? Because I did think that whole point of it's not just a name is a big issue. In fact, last night when I was just trying to ping Randy to let him know that there was no room at the inn, it took me a while to basically sort of find the right real-time communication method to get to Randy. So definitely I think there's a lot of opportunity there just in that front end before we communicate, just based on the frailties of basically how we work as a human. So if not, let's show appreciation for it was a very insightful presentation. Thank you, James.
Thank you.